It happened 3 years ago. When I moved into the apartment, I didn't think much of it. I needed a place, the rent was cheap, and it was just a few blocks from my new job. It didn't look like much from the outside, but it had character. You know, those old buildings that creak and groan when the wind blows. The kind where the walls are so thin you can hear the neighbors sneeze. I was used to that kind of thing. The ad was simple enough. Spacious 2-bedroom apartment for rent. One current tenant, female, mid-20s. Quiet, respectful. Nothing fancy, but it was enough to catch my eye. Anna was the one who showed me around. She had dark hair, pale skin, and a quiet energy about her. She seemed nice enough, soft-spoken, friendly. She told me she worked night shifts at a local diner, so I wouldn't see much of her. Fine by me. I liked my space and didn't mind living with someone as long as I didn't have to share every detail of my life. The first couple of weeks went by without incident. Anna was always polite, never intrusive. She kept to herself, and I kept to mine. It was a good setup. But then, things started to feel off. It was the door at first. I woke up in the middle of the night, groggy, to the sound of the front door creaking open. I glanced at the clock. It was 2:33 a.m. I told myself it was just Anna coming home from work early. But when I peeked out of my room, the apartment was dark. Her door was shut, locked. The hallway was completely empty. I could hear the faint hum of the fridge, the buzz of a street lamp outside, but nothing else. I chalked it up to my imagination. Maybe I just hadn't heard her leave, or maybe she was coming back early from her shift. But the next night, it happened again. The door creaked open at exactly the same time, 2:33 a.m. I got up to check, but again, no one was there. By the third night, I was starting to get a little freaked out, but I didn't want to make a big deal of it. I mean, I didn't know Anna all that well, but she seemed harmless, right? That's when I noticed the mirror. It was a full-length mirror that leaned against the wall in the hallway. It wasn't mine. I didn't even remember it being there when I moved in. But it was old. It had that tarnished gold frame, the kind you see in thrift shops. The glass was cracked in a few places, but it was still standing. At first, I didn't think much of it. I'd walk past it, glancing at my reflection but never paying it any real attention. But over time, I started to notice something strange. I'd see myself in the mirror, of course, but sometimes, just sometimes, I'd catch another reflection, a blur, just behind me. It wasn't clear, but it was there, a shadow. It freaked me out at first, but I just assumed it was a trick of the light or my eyes playing games with me. And then there were the noises. One night I woke up at exactly 2:33 a.m. to the sound of soft footsteps outside my room. I had this horrible gut feeling, like something was wrong. I didn't even think twice. I got up, grabbed my phone, and tiptoed down the hallway. I figured it was Anna, coming home from work. But when I reached the living room, the apartment was dark. The TV was off, no lights, no sounds. But Anna's door was slightly cracked. I could see the faint glow of the streetlight through the blinds. I stood there for a few seconds, just staring at it, my heart pounding. I knocked. "Anna?" I called softly. "You home?" There was no answer. I opened her door just a crack, but it was empty. Her bed was perfectly made, and there were no signs of anyone being there. I turned around to go back to my room when I caught something in the corner of my eye. The mirror. I don't know why, but I turned to look at it. The reflection was almost normal, except for the fact that it wasn't. I was standing in the hallway, but the mirror reflected a figure behind me, blurry but unmistakable. It looked like a woman, but the face was wrong. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't know what to make of it. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But after that, I started noticing more things, little things. For example, Anna never left for work on time anymore. I'd wake up at 2:33 a.m. and hear her moving around her room, but she wouldn't leave. I started hearing soft tapping, like someone was gently knocking on the walls, coming from her side of the apartment. It wasn't loud, just a faint tap, tap, tap. I thought it was weird, but I figured it was just the pipes or something. Then, one night, I heard something worse. It was 2:33 a.m. again, and I woke up to the sound of her door creaking open. But this time, it didn't stop. I heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming down the hallway. I held my breath, hoping it was just my imagination. But the footsteps got closer and closer. Finally, I opened my door and poked my head out. The hallway was empty. Nothing but the dim glow of the streetlight through the window. Except for the mirror. It was like I was drawn to it. I couldn't help it. My feet moved on their own, and before I knew it, I was standing in front of it, staring at my reflection. Only I wasn't alone. Behind me, in the mirror, was Anna, standing there, watching me. Her face was expressionless, her eyes wide and blank. I couldn't breathe. I turned around, but she wasn't there. I backed away slowly, my heart racing. But in the reflection, she was still standing there, right behind me. I ran to my room and slammed the door shut. I locked it and pressed my back against it, my breathing ragged. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I stayed up the rest of the night, terrified to sleep. The next day, I decided I needed to confront Anna. I knocked on her door, but there was no answer. I knocked again. Still, nothing. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, but everything else was silent. I opened her door just a crack. Her room was empty. Her bed was made. I checked the kitchen. Nothing. The bathroom. Empty. I grabbed my stuff and ran downstairs, telling myself it was just a weird coincidence, that maybe she moved out without telling me. But when I reached the landlord's office, things got even stranger. The landlord looked at me like I was crazy. "Anna?" he asked, eyebrows raised. "No one named Anna lives here." "I've never had a tenant by that name." I froze. "What do you mean?" She showed me the apartment. "She's been living here for months." The landlord shook his head. "I don't know who you're talking about. There's only one tenant here. You." I couldn't breathe. My legs felt weak, like they were made of rubber. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I went back to the apartment. I didn't know what else to do. I figured maybe I was losing my mind, but when I walked in, the mirror was different. It was facing the door now, not the wall. I walked up to it slowly, cautiously, and there she was again, Anna, in the reflection, standing just behind me. This time her smile was wide, too wide. And as I turned around, she wasn't there, but her voice was. "You shouldn't have looked," it whispered. I ran out of the apartment. I haven't been back since. Every night, I wake up at 2:33 a.m. and hear those footsteps. I don't know if it's Anna or something else, but I can hear them. And sometimes, I catch a glimpse of her, in the reflection of every mirror I pass. Always smiling, always waiting. I don't think I'll ever escape her. Two years ago, when I was 24, I moved into what seemed like the perfect suburban neighborhood. The rent was reasonable for a nice two-bedroom house, the area looked safe, and my neighbors seemed friendly enough during my initial visit. What I didn't realize was that I'd moved into a community with very specific expectations about how residents should behave. The first sign something was off came during my second week. I'd been working late shifts at my job and coming home around 11 p.m. Mrs. Henderson from across the street knocked on my door the next morning with a concerned expression and a plate of cookies. "We noticed you've been keeping very late hours. she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. In this neighborhood, we all try to maintain regular schedules. It helps keep property values stable. I thanked her for the cookies and explained about my work schedule, but she seemed unsatisfied with my response. She mentioned that the previous tenant had also worked late hours and had struggled to fit in with our community standards. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing that my neighbors paid unusually close attention to my daily routine. Mrs. Henderson would be in her front yard whenever I left for work, always offering a cheerful wave, but clearly making note of my departure time. The elderly man next door, Mr. Peterson, seemed to time his dog walks perfectly with my arrival home each evening. I initially thought they were just being friendly and looking out for each other, which seemed like a positive aspect of living in a tight-knit community. But their attention began feeling more like surveillance than neighborly concern. The neighborhood had a group chat that I was added to within my first month. At first, it seemed normal. People sharing recommendations for local services, posting about lost pets, or organizing block parties. But I gradually noticed that many of the messages were actually reports about residents' activities. Noticed the Johnsons had their garbage out early again. The new family on Maple Street left their porch light off last night. Someone's been parking on the street instead of using their driveway. Each observation was framed as community awareness, but the underlying tone was judgmental. I started receiving messages specifically about my own behavior. Saw you had a friend over on Tuesday night. Hope everything's okay. Your lawn could use some attention when you have time. Noticed your kitchen light was on past midnight. Working late again? The messages always came from different neighbors, but they all had the same passive-aggressive tone that made my actions sound like community violations. I began feeling like I was living under constant scrutiny, unable to exist in my own home without someone taking note. Things escalated when I started dating someone. Jake would come over on weekends, and his car would be parked in my driveway overnight. Within days, I received multiple messages about my frequent male visitor and reminders about the neighborhood's family-friendly atmosphere. Mrs. Henderson knocked on my door again, this time without cookies. She explained that several neighbors had expressed concern about my lifestyle choices and suggested that overnight guests might not be appropriate for our type of community. I told her that who I dated and who stayed at my house were personal matters, but she seemed genuinely confused by my response. We all make sacrifices to maintain the character of this neighborhood, she said. The previous tenant learned that lesson too late. I asked what she meant about the previous tenant, but she just smiled and said I should ask around if I was curious about the neighborhood's history. That evening, I decided to research my house's rental history. What I found was disturbing. Over the past 5 years, my house had been rented by 7 different tenants, with most leases lasting less than 6 months. The rental reviews mentioned intrusive neighbors and community pressure, but the details were vague. I found one detailed review from someone who'd lived there 8 months earlier. They described escalating harassment from neighbors who monitored their activities, reported their guests to the landlord, and made their daily life increasingly uncomfortable until they broke their lease early. The review mentioned finding notes in their mailbox about community standards and receiving anonymous complaints to their employer about their character. The final straw came when their car tires were slashed after they hosted a birthday party that the neighbors deemed too loud, despite ending before 9 p.m. I started paying closer attention to my neighbors' behavior and realized their surveillance was more extensive than I'd initially understood. Mr. Peterson walked his dog past my windows at the same times every day, always glancing inside. Mrs. Henderson had a clear view of my front door from her kitchen window and seemed to spend a lot of time there. I installed a security camera by my front door, which immediately generated discussion in the neighborhood group chat. Several neighbors expressed concern about being recorded without consent and suggested that security cameras created an atmosphere of distrust in the community. The camera footage revealed behaviors that made me deeply uncomfortable. Neighbors were approaching my door when I wasn't home, looking through my windows and examining my mail. Mrs. Henderson had been in my backyard multiple times, claiming later that she was checking on my plants while I was at work. I confronted several neighbors about their behavior, but they all claimed they were just being good neighbors and looking out for community safety. They turned my concerns around, suggesting that my defensive attitude and unwillingness to integrate were causing problems for everyone. The situation reached a breaking point when I received a formal letter from the Homeowners Association, which I hadn't known existed when I signed my lease. The letter detailed multiple violations of community standards, including excessive noise, my television after 10 p.m., inappropriate guests, Jake, staying over, and failure to maintain property appearance. I'd let my grass grow slightly longer than neighboring lawns. The letter included photos of my house taken from various angles, documenting infractions like garbage cans left out an hour past pickup time and my car parked at a slight angle in my driveway. Someone had been systematically photographing my property to build a case against me. I contacted my landlord about the HOA letter, and he seemed uncomfortable with the conversation. He admitted that he'd received multiple complaints about previous tenants from the neighborhood association and had been pressured to be more selective about renters. The final incident happened on a Saturday morning when Jake was visiting. We were having coffee on my back porch when Mrs. Henderson appeared at the fence separating our properties. She announced that she'd called the police about a disturbance and unknown individuals on my property. When the officers arrived, they seemed familiar with the address and the neighbors. They took a report but clearly understood they'd been called for a non-emergency. One officer quietly told me that they received frequent calls from this neighborhood about minor issues and suggested I document any harassment. That week, I decided to break my lease early. The constant surveillance and community pressure had made my home feel like a prison. I couldn't relax in my own space, couldn't have friends over, and couldn't maintain any privacy in my daily life. When I moved out, Mrs. Henderson watched from her window as I loaded my belongings. She came outside as I was finishing and said, "I hope the next tenant will be a better fit for our community." Her tone suggested she'd played a role in my decision to leave. I later learned that the neighborhood had driven out multiple tenants using the same tactics: constant surveillance, community pressure, and formal complaints designed to make residents feel unwelcome. They seemed to have a specific vision of who belonged in their community and systematically excluded anyone who didn't fit their standards. Living there taught me that some neighborhoods aren't just judgmental. They're actively hostile to residents who don't conform to their expectations. The combination of surveillance, social pressure, and coordinated harassment can make someone's home uninhabitable without breaking any laws. If you're looking at rental properties, research the neighborhood carefully and pay attention to online reviews mentioning neighbor issues. Some communities use social pressure as a weapon, and once you're targeted, it's nearly impossible to live peacefully there. My dad pays my rent, and honestly, I'm not even embarrassed about it anymore. I'm 24, working as a barista while trying to get my photography business off the ground, and rent in Denver is absolutely insane. Dad makes good money as a contractor and offered to help out until I can get on my feet. The deal is pretty sweet. He covers rent, and I handle everything else. There's just one thing that's always bugged me about the arrangement. Every month when he sends the money, he asks for photos of my apartment. Not like inspection photos or anything crazy. Just send me a couple pics so I can see how you're doing. He says it makes him feel better about spending the money, knowing I'm taking care of the place and not living like a total slob. I get it, I guess. If I was dropping $1,200 a month on someone else's living situation, I'd probably want to know they weren't trashing the place either. So every month, I take a few quick shots of my living room and kitchen, maybe the bedroom if it's not a complete disaster, and text them over. "Place looks good, kiddo," he always responds. "Keep it up." The weird part started about 3 months ago. I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a photo that made me stop dead. It was my apartment, specifically my living room, but I definitely hadn't posted it. The account was called Denver Living 2023 and had maybe 30 followers. The caption just said, "Cozy vibes," with some random hashtags. I stared at my phone for like 5 minutes trying to figure out what the hell was going on. The photo was taken from the exact same angle I always used when sending Dad his monthly pictures. Same spot by the door, same lighting, everything. But it wasn't one of my photos. I could tell because my camera has this tiny scratch on the lens that leaves a mark, and this picture didn't have it. I figured maybe it was some kind of glitch, like Instagram had somehow pulled an old photo from my texts or something. Technology does weird stuff sometimes. I screenshotted it and forgot about it. 2 weeks later, I found another one. This time it was my kitchen, posted by an account called modernrentals_co, with the caption, "Clean and functional." Again, taken from the exact spot where I always stood to take Dad's monthly photos, but definitely not one of mine. That's when I started paying attention to the metadata on the photos I was sending Dad. I'm pretty tech-savvy from running my photography Instagram, so I know how to check when and where photos were taken. All my monthly apartment pics showed they were taken with my iPhone, at my apartment, usually around the same time each month. But when I reverse searched that Instagram photo, I found it posted on 3 different real estate websites advertising spacious one-bedroom apartments in trendy Denver neighborhoods. They were using my apartment as marketing material for other rentals. I called Dad immediately. "Hey, this is gonna sound crazy, but I think someone's stealing the photos I send you and using them online." "What do you mean stealing them?" "Like posting them on real estate sites and Instagram. Photos of my apartment that look exactly like the ones I send you every month." There was this long pause. "Are you sure they're your photos?" "A lot of apartments look pretty similar." "Dad, it's definitely my place. Same furniture, same everything. But here's the weird part. They're not the actual photos I took. They're like identical shots from the same angle, but taken with a different camera." Another pause. "That is weird. Maybe your landlord is using your apartment to advertise other units." "Maybe, but why wouldn't they ask first? And how would they get the exact same angles as my photos?" "I don't know, kiddo. Could be a coincidence." His tone was off, though, like when I was a kid and asked him where babies come from, and he got all awkward and changed the subject. But I didn't push it. The next month, when it was time for the usual photos, I decided to test something. Instead of taking them during the day like usual, I took them at night with all the lights on. Different time, different lighting, same angles. I sent them to Dad like normal. Got the pics. "Place looks great as always," he texted back within an hour. 3 days later, there was a new post on Denver Living 2023. Night shot of my living room, identical angle, but again, not my photo. This one had better lighting and was taken with what looked like a professional camera. That's when it clicked. Someone with access to my apartment was recreating my photos with professional equipment. Someone who knew exactly where I stood each month, what angles I used, and when I typically sent the photos to Dad. I started thinking about who had keys to my place. The landlord, obviously. The property management company. Emergency maintenance. And then I remembered. Dad had asked for a spare key just in case when I first moved in. The next month, I told Dad I was going out of town for a few days and wouldn't be able to send photos until I got back. Then I set up a hidden camera in my living room and actually did leave for the weekend. When I came home and checked the footage, I nearly threw up. Dad was in my apartment with some guy I'd never seen before, professional-looking dude with an expensive camera. They spent about an hour recreating all my usual photo angles, taking shot after shot with different lighting and equipment. The camera guy kept checking his phone, like he was comparing their shots to reference photos. My photos, the ones I'd been sending Dad every month for over a year. After they left, I just sat there staring at the footage. My own father had been using my monthly check-ins to create a catalog of my apartment, then hiring someone to come back and take professional versions of those same shots for online advertising. I called him that night. "Dad, we need to talk." "About what?" "About you and your photographer friend breaking into my apartment." Long silence. Then, what are you talking about?" "I have video, Dad. I know you've been using my photos to create fake listings. What the hell?" He sighed and suddenly sounded tired. "It's not fake listings. I'm not scamming anyone." "Then what?" "Your apartment is in a really desirable building. Great location, good layout. I've been using it as a model to help market other properties I'm working on. The photos help potential tenants visualize what they could have." "So you've been stealing my privacy to make money." "I'm not making money off your apartment specifically. I'm using it as a reference to help people find similar places. It's marketing, not stealing." "Dad, you've been coming into my home without telling me. You've been taking pictures of my personal space and posting them online. How is that not stealing?" "I pay for that space, and I'm helping people find good housing. What's the harm?" "The harm is that you violated my trust. You turned our financial arrangement into some weird business scheme. You made me feel like I had to perform for you every month, sending photos like a good little tenant, when really you were just collecting data for your side hustle." "It's not a side hustle. I genuinely wanted to make sure you were taking care of the place." "Bullshit, Dad. If that was true, you wouldn't need professional photos taken with someone else's camera." He went quiet again. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller. "I'm sorry. I know it looks bad, but I really was worried about you. And when I saw how nice you kept the place, I thought maybe I could help other kids find somewhere similar. I never meant for you to find out." "You never meant for me to find out that you were using our relationship to run some kind of real estate operation out of my living room." "It wasn't like that. Dad, what if I had brought someone home? What if I had been walking around naked when you showed up with your camera guy? What if I had people over for a party and you just walked in?" He hadn't thought about any of that. In his mind, he was helping both me and other young renters. In reality, he'd been treating my home like his personal photo studio and me like an unwitting business partner. I told him I didn't want his money anymore. I'd rather work 2 jobs and live in a studio apartment than deal with this weird surveillance situation he'd created. Trust isn't something you can just fix with an apology, especially when the violation went on for over a year. He's been calling and texting nonstop, trying to make things right, offering to pay extra to make up for the misunderstanding. But there's no making up for finding out your dad sees your living situation as a business opportunity rather than your home. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect your privacy are the ones violating it the most.